If you want confidence and you want self-esteem, take fucking responsibility for your life. And that is the byproduct of it.
We tend to fall into a belief that we're helpless and that we simply cannot do anything about the way things are, the way we feel, what we've experienced. And we're here today to try to refute that belief.
The victim mentality that I lived with for 40 years used those situations as excuses, whereas the survivor mentality says to me, sometimes bad things happen to good people.
Yeah.
Taking radical responsibility.
Yes, it is.
It is an absolutely humbling experience because I realize that I was wrong a lot.
Welcome to No Alcohol Needed, the podcast. You are hanging out at the intersection of emotional wellness, personal growth, and living an alcohol-free life. Here we share everything we've learned and continue to learn about how to be happy, no alcohol needed. Hello and welcome everybody to No Alcohol Needed, the podcast, formerly Through the Glass Recovery podcast. For those regular listeners who aren't aware yet, yes, we are going through a rebrand. We are now No Alcohol Needed, and you can check back just a few episodes. Steve and I are explaining the entire thing and why we've decided to make some changes, but we are super excited to bring you a little bit of a new format. And we also have Christen and Sean here with us today. We're going to jump into some cool conversation and just really glad that everyone's here. We would love to hear from you, to all of our listeners. If you want to let us know what you think of the No Alcohol Needed and the new version and all the cool stuff we're doing, please let us know. Drop a comment, drop us an email. We would always love to hear from you guys. And if there's ever a topic you want us to talk about, we want to know about it. So make sure you keep in touch. We love hearing from you. So today's episode might actually kind of piss some people off. This topic tends to rub people the wrong way. And my hope is that as listeners, you guys will listen with us and think hard about what is truly in your control. We tend to fall into a belief that we're helpless and that we simply cannot do anything about the way things are, the way we feel, what we've experienced. And we're here today to try to refute that belief. You are not helpless. You are not simply a victim of your own life. You have so much more power than you think you do. So when we talk about taking radical responsibility in our lives, it tends to create some friction and rub up against some raw nerve endings. But if you can hang through that, it also has incredible healing potential. So I hope you'll stick it out. I hope you'll really dig into this conversation with us. I do want to mention before we dive into all of this, we know that we have some listeners out there who have been the victim of some truly horrible circumstances. And please know that we are not here to blame or shame anyone for what you've been through. We are here to help you take your power back. This is not about what happened. This is about the aftermath. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what it means to take radical responsibility in our lives. I'm going to start with the first question and we'll see where this goes. So, what is something that you guys have blamed other people for in the past? And maybe give an example of a time that you have acted more as the victim in your life. Anybody's welcome to start.
Yeah.
There are no rules here. Dive in.
I'll start. This is such a hard question for me to talk about on a podcast because number one, like you mentioned in the beginning, some of the circumstances I've been through where I blamed people, there were truly people to be blamed.
Mhm.
That's like one part of it. And there's no way around certain situations where I was a victim in a sense of if you looked at it, there's a crime, there's a victim, that piece. So, and the other part that's hard is through the process of radical responsibility, even with those people, I have repaired relationships to an extent with boundaries, right? So when thinking about these situations, it's I'm going to be a little bit vague because also some of those people might listen to the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to protect their privacy, not because I want to protect anybody who did anything to me, whether that's real or contrived in my mind. but because I think that's the human thing to do. I think it's the human compassion. It's the way I want to live my life. So on a broad spectrum, I would say there are multiple instances of childhood trauma where I blamed people. I'll also say I blamed my mother for her own death. She was very sick through my childhood, and also used her death as an excuse for why I mistreated myself, my own body, my children, and everyone else at large in the world, right? Like I deserve to treat people this way. My divorce, I definitely blamed my ex-husband when I cheated on him. It was all his fault, for sure. And then several toxic relationships were situations where I really blamed people. So I don't know if those are like as specific examples as what you were talking about, but I will venture to say, and it is what it is, and I think it's relevant for this podcast. I consider my life what it was before I got sober and what it's been since I've gotten sober, which was 7 years ago. And it is fair to say that I never took responsibility for anything really until I got sober. So to ask me to like isolate one instance, I'm kind of honing out when I mention those things specific instances of me blaming others that really took priority in my life and created a situation where I was viewing the world through the lens of being a victim, and created a situation, a life, not a situation, a life, every situation where I acted from a place of being angry, defensive, ultimately scared, right? Like fear was how I ran my life. Those are the things that come to mind, right? Like my divorce, my several toxic relationships that happened after the divorce, the death of my mother, and my childhood trauma are kind of like the big, and aside from my mother, and I was thinking about this when I was thinking about the question, and I was thinking about that lens of victimness and that lens of fear. Though all of those relationships, sorry, Steve and Sean, involved men, right? All of those toxic relationships involved men. So I would say for the first 40 years of my life, I walked around in this place of being a victim of men, blaming men, being fearful of men, being defensive to a point of debilitating anxiety. And also, through the trauma lens that you mentioned in the beginning, multiple events that happened were it was rightful that I was scared, right? Especially when they happen as a child. I don't, and I think a big part of this too is I blame myself as much as I blame others. So learning how not to have that blame mentality that I was my own victim, right? Learning how not to have that was so critical for me. And I kind of went outside the boundaries of your question there, but those are all of the things I thought about when I thought about that question. And there is probably not a single interaction where somebody was grouchy with me, somebody cut me off in the road, a server didn't bring me my water fast enough, where it wasn't somebody else's fault for the first 40 years of my life, including, I have 5 children I raised, and they went through some pretty tragic time periods with me. They were pretty tragic, and ultimately they were the people that were traumatized in those, and luckily they've kind of grown through this with me. But the entire time I was traumatizing them, I was blaming them. I was blaming them,
Yep.
right? Even the most innocent person that crossed my path, I was blaming. And I'm very careful not to use this as an excuse these days, but I do bring that all back to the victim mentality, right? And I think I'm sure we'll touch on this later, but I think the critical 2 terms for me are victim and survivor. And the victim mentality that I lived with for 40 years used those situations as excuses, whereas the survivor mentality says to me, myself, when I'm talking about being a survivor, says sometimes bad things happen to good people, right? But, and so it doesn't negate, right? There's a very careful, now when even talking, you can hear my voice shaking a little bit because some of these events were truly traumatic that I blamed people for, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But shifting my own internal voice to survivor. So, if you hear me say like, I survived this, I survived that, I survived divorce, I survived it's yeah, I just want to make sure that I sort of say that out loud because that language is very critical for me in specifically in the childhood trauma situations and the death of my mother, right? The divorce, the toxic relationships, those are kind of like these arms of all of these base situations that I've blamed people for, which are childhood trauma and my mother.
Yeah.
And that's what created for me. I feel like the lens that I'm talking about, the lens of I'm a victim, and the framework of that to view my life. So when I'm asked to specify specific situations, I wish you guys had video of me from 10 years ago. And like, here she is. It would have been your fault that my face is broken out the night of the podcast. It would be your fault that the lighting's bad. It would be your fault that I wasn't on time. Your software's fault that I logged in last, whatever the problem was. So anyways, now I just blame you guys in secret for that stuff.
Perfect. I don't want to hear about it anyway. I don't want to hear about that shit. No, I like it. Keep it to yourself.
No, you spoke so well and so sensitively to that, and I really appreciate that. I knew after just talking to you and getting little bits of your story last week that you would speak well to this topic, and I think that that's the perfect example right there of victim and survivor. We're acknowledging that stuff happened that should never have happened, and it was not fair, and it was not okay, and it was not your fault. And also, you are overcoming it. You're not letting that be the lens that you look at the entire world and your entire life with now. And so, no, you answered that perfectly. We certainly don't need more detail than that. But I do appreciate your sharing so much. Thank you. And Sean, do you
Very
want to
cool.
speak to that also?
Well, again, just like thinking back 26 years ago when I started this journey, kind of like Christen, I blamed everybody and everything for everything that was happening to me. But really, I'll be honest, who I blamed the most was me. I was a victim of my own perpetration. And I victimized myself over and over and over again. So it would keep me in that cycle of addiction, right? Shame myself, I'd drink. I'd shame myself, I'd drink. Or you'd piss me off, I'd drink. Or they'd piss me off and I'd drink. But I just kind of stayed there because my addiction loved that. I'm a big believer that if you want to starve addiction, get rid of the shame because addiction
Absolutely.
feeds on shame. So yeah, I mean, and I could talk about, childhood trauma like Christen did and all the things that happened to me. And yes, there was a time in my life that I blamed everybody. It's been so long now that it's hard for me to think back on that, except for one person. I used to blame my ex-wife for a lot of stuff. I would blame her for how she would respond to my poor behaviors because her response was just as poor as mine was. So I was definitely a victim of that. You guys have worked with me a little bit. I really like talking more about the solution than I do the past problem. So I could just say that I definitely was a victim for a long time. It kept me drunk, and I choose not to go there as much anymore. Yeah.
And I completely agree with you. We are here to talk about solutions, I guess, and
Yeah.
so our audience understands too. Part of the reason that we're digging into what that looked like is because we want our audience to also recognize that
Yeah.
in their own lives. Because I know I was blaming everybody for everything, and I didn't even realize I was doing that. And so I think sometimes when people hear us talk about that, they're like, "Oh no, I don't do that." And then hearing other people describe what their experience is with it, here's how I did that in my life. They're like, oh shit, maybe I do that. And so, to Sean and to our audience also, when we dig into what it was like before, it's because we want to help you potentially see some of this stuff in your life. And like Sean and Christen have both said, when I think about blaming people in my life, I blamed my kids and my husband so much for my shitty moods and shitty behaviors. And I had no capacity to handle my emotions. I had no capacity to take a step back and consider what was going on and then come back with a healthy response. I just reacted, and it was, they did this and it made me feel this way. The cashier at the store was rude and it made me angry, and everybody did things and it made me feel a certain way. And of course that was the excuse to drink, right? But I think this obviously, not even I think, I know this goes back to before my drinking days, where my parents did something, it made me feel a certain way. And I didn't recognize at that time that I had control over how I viewed that situation, and therefore had control over how I felt about the situation, which I think that was shocking to me, that I had any kind of control once I started doing some work on myself. And that's a really simplistic example, but I think one that happens to a lot of people every single day. Right? My husband said this thing and it made me angry and it made me feel bad about myself and it made me this and it made me yell, and and that's completely blaming someone else for something that really I needed to take responsibility for. Just on the simplest day-to-day level is one of the examples that I can share. What about you, Steve?
Take responsibility for. No, I could have told you that 5 years ago, I'll be 5 years sober in March. So 5 years ago was pre-sober Steve. That 5 years ago, I thought I was taking responsibility for things. And I think the taking responsibility was, I'm responsible for blaming that person for how that shit went. And that was my version of taking responsibility. Blame is going to be a topic here. I think that's going to be a common theme. But the first thing that came up for me was at work. I'm at work. My boss isn't doing the things that I asked him to do, so that's why this fucked up. The maintenance guys didn't do their job, and that's why that broke. And like the laundry list of things, and this is why I'm stuck at work late, and it's all their fault.
Right.
And it's them to blame, and it's their mistakes that are making me pissed off right now, and making me miss time with my family, and making the plethora of things, including I need to drink over something. I think the responsibility I took was to avoid the responsibility. I was really good at being responsible for that part. And
You were responsible for deciding who to blame.
exactly.
Yeah, that's
And
an important responsibility.
It literally felt like, though, if you were to ask me back then, if I was like doing the right things, I would have told you probably yes. I would have told you that was the right way to, the lens, as Christen said, the right lens to live my life through. Although it sucked. Like, I was never happy. Shit didn't work out very well. I mean, I did an excellent job of ruining relationships.
And blaming them.
And no.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then another story, and this one goes into, Sean, what you brought up, the like dropping it on yourself. Ever since this whole nice guy thing kind of cropped up in my life, where I had some things to reflect on, I would look at myself and say, you know what? I was super agreeable. I did all the things that I was supposed to do. I bent over backwards. How come this is still not enough? This is your fault. If only you would appreciate me, then we would be fine. Like, that sort of attitude and that sort of mentality, where I really never owned anything. Even though I felt like I was, and I felt like I was trying, I never owned my part in any of it, really. I tried to deflect. I was a good, deflector of, I tried not to take any blame, which also meant I really never took responsibility either.
Right.
Like, if I'm going to deflect any of that blame for my mistakes, then I'm not going to also grab onto the responsibility, because that right there is shameful as hell.
Mm, exactly. And we'll get into that shame piece, because this really all does go back to shame. So
Mhm.
many of these podcasts eventually end up going back to shame. It's like Sean said, it's the driver behind addiction for almost everybody. And so I guess the next question I want to get into is, what does it look like to then take radical responsibility in your life? What does that look like when you finally decide that you're the one that's going to take charge? You're going to take the blame, right? But you're also going to take the credit. What does that look like?
Now Sean is
Now,
sitting
this
there
is
with
where
the
Sean's been
smile.
waiting for
This
this.
is yeah. Sean's like, he's got the smile on his face. He's like,
It fucking sucks, is what it looks like. It's like, why in the hell do I have to be the better person?
Mm,
yes,
But my addiction requires me to be. Because if I'm an asshole, if I go back and become very selfish, self-centered, then I'm going to drink again. And I haven't drank in a long time, and I don't want to do that anymore.
mhm.
But taking full responsibility, kind of what we were talking about, is you don't make me feel anyway. You
Mhm,
have
Yeah.
no power to make me feel anyway.
mhm.
I make myself feel what I feel based on the meaning I give the events in my life. And the meaning I give the events in my life are shaped by my history. They're shaped by my childhood. They're shaped by my trauma. So I have to really pay attention to, what is the meaning I'm giving this? Because my meaning is going to dictate the way I feel. My thought is going to dictate the way I feel, and then my feeling is going to usually dictate my behavior.
Mhm.
So that's what it looks like for me, is what is my thought, and could I change it? Right? There's a stand-up comedian that does a lot of work with recovery, and he says his first thought is wrong. Forgot what his name was, but he's like, my mantra is, my first thought's wrong. So I just, first thought, fuck that. What's the next thought I could have? Because usually the first one is not what I need, if that makes sense.
That makes total
Um,
sense.
Right. So, and it just really looks like that. For me, it looks like, how am I interpreting what my wife is doing? Right. My wife is doom scrolling on TikTok, and the meaning I'm giving it is, she's not paying attention to me. Right. And, I get all butt hurt and I go and pout in the corner. It's like, no, my wife's doom scrolling on TikTok because she had a really shitty day and she needs 20 minutes. Oh, that feels a little different. Right. So I want to get into the victim mode, but knowing that I can control my thoughts a lot of the time, not all the time, then I control the way I feel. If I can't control the way I think, then I can definitely control the way I behave. And that's also taking responsibility. So if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I can go for a run or I can go for a walk, and that'll change the way I feel, which then will change the way I think.
Mhm.
But I'm responsible for my reaction to life. I am not always responsible for what happens to me, but I am always responsible for how I respond to it.
Yeah, absolutely. This
Mhm.
kind
But
of
it
makes
takes
me.
practice. Just takes
Oh, it totally
practice.
takes practice. Like, we all say this, and that's important for our listeners too out there.
Yeah.
None of this comes naturally. We don't
Oh
flip
my
a switch
God.
and suddenly we're like, all right, I'm responsible for everything. Like, it takes constant practice and a lot of failing, and then learning, and then practicing. And yeah, so I was going to say really quick, Steve gives this example sometimes of, and this is kind of a way of taking responsibility. And I'm probably going to botch this compared to what Steve says. But if somebody came up to me and was like, you are uneducated and incapable and you have no business doing what you're doing and blah, 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 I would absolutely shut down, and I would be like, oh my God, you're right. And I would start spiraling, and I would start feeling horrible about myself, and, like, all of the stuff. If somebody came up to me and was like, you are a horrible mother who can't keep who can't stay organized and can't stay on top of things, and what, I'd be like, fuck off. Like, that's not true. It would not affect me at all, because I know that I'm a pretty decent mom and I do a really good job of managing things, but I have some insecurity when it comes to, am I uneducated? Am I incapable? Do I, and so I guess the responsibility piece there is, when that person says that thing to me that feels insulting, that's because that's the lens that I see myself through also. I need to do some work there. I need to build my own confidence. It has nothing to do with that person and what they said. It has everything to do with the way that I feel about myself. And so I have control over a situation like that because that means I can work to build my own self-worth and I can work to change the way that I see myself and the work that I do or whatever that is. So I think that, that's a weird example. And it's one that I think rubs people the wrong way when Steve shares that with folks in our meetings, but it's so true because somebody only hurts your feelings if it's already something that you kind of believe about yourself. Um,
Mhm.
Kristen, do you want to
Yes.
share a little bit of what it looks like when you have taken radical responsibility?
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say, which is kind of playing off of everything that Sean was saying, and that you were saying, is that it does take practice. And I want to communicate to people, and I try to communicate this to people all the time. The longer you practice, it's true. There's a lot of falling down and getting up and trying again and falling down. But but the little reward of one time when someone cuts you off in traffic and your response is, they must be having a really bad day. Or your first thought is, or your second thought, as the case may be, is what if they're on the way to get to their wife in the hospital who's in labor? Like, what feels better to me, right? Does it feel better to me to respond with anger and be like, screw you, I almost hit you? Or does it feel better to me to feel compassion for that person? And so that's like one thing about like the feeling change thing. That I was thinking about as far as like radical responsibility in my daily life. Like I did work the 12 steps. I do work them, over and over. And I don't know if we're allowed to talk about that in this podcast. I
Yeah,
assume we are. It's
please
definitely part
do.
of my story. And there is something about like reflecting throughout the day and definitely at the end of the day and calling people up and saying, hey, I did this and it was wrong, and hearing the response and not tying into that anything that they may have done to me but not I did this and it was wrong, but if you didn't cut me off in traffic 5 minutes ago, I never would have responded to you like that. Just that pure, I did this and it was wrong. And in this sort of like response, and I talk a lot about like how I feel in my body because I was so uncomfortable holding all of that anger and blame. It is so heavy. It is such a big responsibility when I think it's my job to teach everybody in the world how to be a decent human. Like, it's just heavy and it's a big job and it's impossible. And so the baby steps that I've taken to sort of release that it feels better. It feels better in my body. I breathe deeper. I experience less anxiety. And to what Sean said, like, I think I was holding on to anger so that I could drink, so that I had an excuse to run away with drugs, so that I had an excuse. But, but if I'm acting out of compassion and if I'm taking responsibility and if I'm giving people and myself the benefit of the doubt in life, there's not a need for me to run away from it. I don't need to run away from life. I want to be an active participant in my life today, right? I don't want my anger I don't want my anger to take it over. I don't want an excuse to run away from it anymore. But that took a really long time, and like the God, I was probably 11 months into recovery before I really grasped that, before I really was working like 10, 11, 12. It was 12 months before I was really, really working them. And, and so it's almost like I don't think I truly got those lessons until I got there. Right.
Hmm.
And I remember like the first time that I was able to take responsibility in the moment for something, and like what a relief that was, right? Like what a relief it is. And it's so reminiscent of like the very first taste of serenity that I ever felt, which was only like 4 months into recovery, but it was only like a second long. Right. So I was like, oh, I want more. I want more because that's what I do. Because that's what
Uh-huh.
I do. I want more. I don't moderate. I don't moderate certainly with anything that makes me feel good. Right. And luckily, and like this is kind of like the message that I try to convey to people, it's just as it is just as addictive for me to take responsibility because I know what the feeling is going to be afterwards. It's just as addictive for me to operate with compassion because I know that I'm then not going to be angry. And I know that today I have a choice. Like I could take a drink, but I'm choosing to live in a state of compassion. I'm choosing to live in a state of responsibility for my actions, and I'm actively doing that. Um, so like for me, while it's hard, and I totally agree with Sean, like sometimes I'm like, but that person did that thing to me. They did do that thing to me. The cashier was a jerk to me. There is a way for me to make a shift and it feels good. Like the shift feels good. And I want people to know how good it feels,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, and it and oh, this is a horrible thing to say out loud, but I'm gonna say it because I'm so truthful. It feeds my ego in a way. Like I am so excited and proud that when someone's mean to me, I don't have to be angry at them. I'm like, I love you too. There was a lady in my yoga class. Oh my God. There was this lady in my yoga class the other day. And I walk into the class. My boyfriend and I were late, whatever, and it's like crowded. And we walk in and there's only 2 spots and they're like across the room, but there's one lady that's taking up like 4 spots. And so one of the spots is next to her. So he lays down his mat and he's like, hey, could you move over like 4 inches so we could be together? And she goes, why? She can just sit over there, like just like that. And I hope she hears this podcast. I'm going to tell her how to process you. And I was so mad. And I took my stuff and I looked at him and I go, I hope you enjoy that energy during class. And right in front of her. And then I like go over and I go to my little spot by myself and the teacher's like, okay, everybody set your intentions for this class. And she's saying like, take a really deep breath and like do the things and who do you want to be today? And I genuinely was able to start thinking about like, what is this person afraid of? Like I was able to start praying
Wonderful.
for
Mm-hmm.
her. I was
That's
able
cool.
to start to set my intention for her to have a better day or for her to be less fearful. I was able to put myself in her shoes. So first thought wrong, 1,000%. How bad I felt from the moment she said it through when I placed until the teacher had me take a few deep breaths and said, set your intentions. And I had a minute. The tension in my body was almost unbearable. I wanted to cry. I was thinking of what I was going to tell her after class. I was thinking of all of those things. And the moment I was like, what if she's having a bad day? Stay out of her way. The moment I started like praying for her and meaning it, right? There's that
Mm-hmm.
I pray that your plane crashes tonight kind of prayer. And then there's like the real
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I wonder what made her scared. I hope for this person that they can live, you know, a life that's as peaceful as the one that I get to live today.
Mm-hmm.
The shift that makes for me, that's what radical responsibility is and how sorry I was. I spent the last 10 minutes of class thinking about how I was going to take responsibility for my snide comment about enjoy that energy in yoga. I'm so zen that I turn around to him and say that like I immediately was not any better or I was worse because I didn't respond with compassion. So, radical responsibility also is a huge release. Like it's really hard to get there, but it creates a situation where I'm allowed to be okay. And I
Mhm.
did not have that when I was blaming everybody, where I don't have to think about what am I going to tell her to teach her never to say that again?
Right.
How am I going to now? Because those thoughts take over my mind. I will replay that. If I did not get to that point, I would still, obviously, I am to some extent still replaying it, but I would be replaying what am I going to say to her next time? What am I going to do
Oh,
when I see her
spiraling.
Oh
Sunday?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I would do it in
Yeah.
the shower. I would do it in the car. And
Right.
instead I'm like, oh, remember that Jane Smith likes her place. So if you want to be sitting next to your partner, get there early.
That's
Right.
That's what
awesome.
I'm thinking.
Yeah.
That's
No,
what I'm
it's
That's
a
thinking.
awesome.
perfect
You
shift.
release
Yeah.
her responsibility
Yeah.
to make you feel better.
Yeah.
And that's
Mhm.
it. And you've found the way that is taking responsibility for how you feel. Even when the snark comes out, there's the I mean, I get it.
Right.
I get it. When I'm listening to you talk and we're talking about radical responsibility, there's a couple of things that go through my mind. One of them was the story that Julie told, that it was an example that I had heard someone say that helped me see the world through a lens in which I could take responsibility for the things and that I needed to, and also understand that when I'm affected by what someone is saying, that is about me. That is a message for me, about me, and something I need to deal with, because whatever's happening over there isn't about me anyways.
Right.
It's a reflection of wherever they're at. And it took me a really long time to tear away that separation, because clearly I was the most important. And one of the things that I heard said to me really early on was, I'm not as important as I think I am.
Right.
Mm.
And the other one is, anger is a punishment that you give to yourself for someone else's behavior.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
I saw that on a reel for social media, and I've never forgotten it since, because I could feel that sucker when I heard that being said. And
Mhm.
that to me was a piece of wisdom that I sat with that one, and I was like, man, did that one ever slap me upside the face? And it called me
Mhm.
Sally and Ron and everything else, because ouch. Simple things like that I put it into a perspective that I could digest.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's neat.
It really let me say, okay, I had the same response as you did, Sean. I wrote notes down, and the first thing I wrote is, it's a really fucking humbling experience.
Mm. Yeah.
Taking radical responsibility.
Yes, it is.
It is an absolutely humbling experience, because I realize that I was wrong a lot,
Yeah.
especially in my past.
Mhm.
Especially in my past, because when I started taking that responsibility for where I was today and for what my response and reaction was, and learning even to pause, the part that sucked the most, after the feeling, Christen, you're talking about, that good feeling you get from actually owning it and not running from the shit, because running from it took a lot of energy,
Yeah.
and owning it takes a lot of energy in the moment.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But the peace that comes from it afterwards is priceless.
Mhm.
You
It's like
don't
ripping the
know.
Band-Aid off.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
and so it was incredibly hard, that when I realized how much I could own, the reflections of my past would come back and go, oh man, did I ever fuck that one up? Oh man, did I ever fuck that one up? Oh shit, I threw that guy under the bus. That doesn't feel good. And a lot for me, a lot of those feelings came up. and it 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 helped me show up in the world with a different kind of compassion.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
Kristen, you
cool.
said something else that I could relate to, and it all has to do with, I just lost that thought. That one like came and left. It's gone.
Love
Getting that
it.
sometimers, not the Alzheimer's, but the
And
sometimers.
I'll take sometimers any day.
Yeah.
Now,
Um,
I'll jump in here really quick.
Yep.
And one of the things that I've learned to ask myself when I'm trying to avoid responsibility is, what am I gaining? How is this benefiting me trying to avoid it? And for me, a big part of the benefit was that, or what I thought was the benefit, was avoiding shame. Shame was my driver for all of my bad behaviors. I swear, underneath all of it, that was shame. And so I wouldn't take responsibility for the things that I needed to because I was afraid of feeling the shame. So when I acted in a way towards my kids that I knew was not appropriate for a mother, I would blame them, because otherwise I would have to own it and take responsibility, and that would make me feel shame. And if I, there's so many things if I look back. And the other way that it benefited me was it gave me an excuse to drink. It gave me an excuse to escape. It gave me an excuse to whatever. And so I think a lot of times we take these things that we blame others for. And if we ask ourselves, what am I getting from this? What am I getting from blaming that person? If we can recognize that, then we can also recognize, like, I know that I have shame resilience now. I am capable of feeling shame. And then I'm also capable of being done feeling the shame. I know how to come back from that versus blaming the other person and refusing to take responsibility. And like Kristen said, carrying that weight forever. And the weight builds and builds and builds instead of just saying, okay, I'm going to say the thing. I'm going to be ashamed of myself because I should be. And now I'm
Right.
going to come back from that because I have the skills built up to move through the shame and then remind myself with compassion that I'm still lovable. Like that compassion piece is huge, whether it's for someone else, whether it's for ourselves. We're all human. We all make mistakes. We all act in ways that we wish we wouldn't have. Other people are doing the same thing. And so the compassion piece, whether it's for ourselves or for other people, I think is really important.
Yeah.
For me, that was a big one, was what is what am I how am I benefiting from this? And once I started taking responsibility, then I can change and I can grow and I can learn and I can become a better person instead of avoiding the responsibility with everything that I had in me. And so it's really in so many different ways. It's been a growth process. If we talk about, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, I'll see if anybody else has anything to share, but in what ways has it benefited you? In what ways have you really gained from learning how to take responsibility for stuff you really didn't want to take responsibility for?
I recognized at some point that I have an incredible amount of power in how I respond and how I act and how I show up in this world, regardless of what happens around me. And I have the freedom of making those decisions over and over again. And it's empowering as hell. Like, I can step into fear now and be like, yep, I butchered that one. And I can also turn around and acknowledge the good things that I've done. And even though it's still hard today, I can turn around now because of that radical responsibility. I get to feed that ego just a little bit every once in a while. I get to feel a sense of pride, which is weird to feel because it feels like I'm blowing myself up and my head won't fit through the door. But because it's such a foreign thing, I actually get to say, I did that thing and it had impact, and damn, that feels good.
Mhm.
And
And
that's not even pridefulness. I think that, and like Kristen said too, it feeds your ego. I think
mhm,
that's just taking credit for
it
your own
is.
growth. And
Mhm.
there's a difference between being egotistical about it and just giving yourself credit that you've grown. I think we all that's one of the benefits,
Mhm.
right, of this whole responsibility thing. We have to take the blame, we have to take the responsibility, but we also get to take the credit when
Yeah.
we do show up in a healthier way.
I have so much better sense of self today because of that.
Right.
Yes.
And that
Yeah.
creates such a cycle where you keep doing it. That's the thing. That's the reward. And I gotta say, Steve, when you guys first sent me the topic, I was like, I wrote down my favorite phrase, which is being angry is like drinking poison and thinking the other person's gonna die.
Yep.
So it was like so cool that you said that. And I was like, I don't know who I'm quoting, so I can't really say this out loud and definitely can't take credit for it. But that over and over has been the thing, like,
Mhm.
which is exactly what you were getting at, Julie, which is who am I punishing here? Like, what am I
Mhm.
getting out of this? And the change in my life, and I think you're totally right, Julie, it's not pride. It's just being like, I can do this.
Hmm.
Like, it's like, I can do this. And I appreciate the gift that it's giving me, right? Which is some peace of mind, like some peace in my life. Like the the level of like happiness and joy in my life, like anger is such a block to experiencing those things. Like when I'm angry, if I go for a walk, I don't see the pretty fall leaves. I don't see the neighbor and go talk to them and their dog. I'm rolling that conversation through my head. So the shift in my life is just my openness to them, and I can get all woo woo with this, and I will, because to the magic of life, right?
Hmm.
To the magic of what we're actually capable of and
Mhm.
what can happen. And we're not capable of saving the world. We're not capable of we are definitely not capable of changing other people, right? Like we cannot do that. But if I'm part of the problem, even if my part in the problem is just holding on to that childhood trauma, right? Not that the trauma happened, but that I'm using it as an excuse. If I'm part of the problem, then I'm part of the solution. And I am the solution. If I am
Mhm.
the problem, I am the solution. And right now, in this moment, for me, and I know this isn't true for everybody, so I want to be really careful. Not in this moment because I don't do it as much because I got called out on it about 6 years ago, but I am the problem with those childhood traumas still. They're not happening to me right now. They're not happening to me right now. So if I am choosing to be angry or to be mean to people or to then, and I'm not saying everybody does this, and I do want to be very careful with my language, but for years, I kept that as an excuse for why I blamed my children, for why I yelled at my children. Like I had a 4-year-old telling her 2-year-old brother, don't cry. Do you want to send mommy to the loony bin? Like you
Mm.
might send mommy to the loony bin one day.
Mhm.
And guess where mommy landed? Right? You know what I mean? Like, what did I do? What did I do to those kids? But of course, we've all worked through that. But the change in life with taking responsibility just for my own feelings and definitely for my own actions is it's like so hard to explain to people. It's
Mhm.
so hard to tell people. And it took for me, and I think, like everybody's probably listening to us and being like, well, I'm so glad Steve and Julie and Sean and Kristen that you guys can change the way you feel, but I'm still mad. I'm still pissed, and I'm 12 months sober, or I'm 12 years sober and somebody just died and I'm mad right now. I'm really angry. I think a big part of it is exactly what you were saying. And like, how do I do this? Right? This is what they're thinking. How do I do this? How do I have access to happiness? Because it doesn't feel
Hmm.
like you do. It does not feel like you do. It does not feel like you can change your feelings or your responses or your actions, but it's just practice. Like I tell people that it is just practice. And if you can have a buddy or a sponsor or a friend or a group, an accountability partner, and I don't think this applies just to people who struggle with substances. I think this applies to everybody.
Yes.
No
Get a
doubt.
buddy.
Yeah.
Get a buddy.
Mhm.
Don't make friends with people who won't hold you accountable, because we don't always have the ability to hold ourselves accountable. It's often not until someone's like, hey, Kristen, you were a real bitch yesterday. Can we
Right.
talk about that? That I even know that I did it. That I
Yeah.
even know that I did
Everyone
it.
needs a friend like that, don't they?
Yeah.
It's so
I'm not
important.
friends with people that won't do that. Like, I'm like, oh,
Absolutely.
there is no sugarcoating with me. You need to tell me like it is, because otherwise I will steamroll you.
Start
Yeah.
moving the goalposts.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
for
like,
sure.
and I don't want to
I
hurt
love
people
this.
anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
The honesty is so valuable. What do you
Yeah,
have, Sean? How
absolutely.
has this responsibility thing really benefited you?
You know, taking responsibility is a teaching moment, and there's a lesson there. And if you stay the victim, then you don't get the lesson.
Mhm.
So taking responsibility, you become a student of your life situation. And I'm woo-woo too, Kristen. So the life situation is there to teach you something, and you're not fucking listening.
Right.
Right. And I'm sorry, this isn't about being a victim. And you're going to continue to get that life situation thrown in your face until you fucking listen.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And with this, with taking responsibility for your emotions, means you're taking responsibility on how to regulate them, and you're not projecting them onto other people. And for me, I lived my life like a ping pong ball. I was just going back and forth. People hit the ball, and I was out of control, and I was reacting based on everybody else's behaviors. And I had zero self-confidence, zero,
None.
Yeah.
no self-esteem. And taking responsibility. If you want confidence and you want self-esteem, take fucking responsibility for your life. And that is the byproduct of it. It is hard. I shit the bed often trying to do it. But when I do it correctly, there is a level of confidence there that I am really proud of. And I'm not very proud of myself a lot of the time.
Mhm.
So, for me, that's the best part about taking responsibilities. You can actually depend on yourself, and I don't depend on other people to dictate how I'm going to feel.
Yeah. The self-esteem, self-worth piece is massive. When you're trying to avoid taking responsibility for anything, blaming everybody else, you become this tiny, small person incapable of everything. You are literally a victim of your own life, whatever happens. And when you start taking responsibility, you realize I'm actually in charge of my life. I have power over my life. I have the power to direct my life and my actions, and it gives you a sense of control. When you're living in that victim state, you feel like you have no control over anything. You're just constantly putting out fires and constantly trying to cope, and literally you're coping your way through life versus taking
Yeah.
responsibility for it. And then you have control, at least over yourself. You can never control other people, but you can always
Yeah.
control yourself and how you respond to any situation. So
Yeah.
with that, I'm going to give you guys our last question here to kind of wrap it up. So if you want to give me kind of a brief answer and let me know your thoughts, what is one small, absolutely doable act of responsibility that someone could take like this week to feel a little bit more in control of their own happiness?
I've got one that's really easy to teach. And if you watch a gentleman by the name of Andrew Huberman, Dr. Huberman on the internet, he talks about this too. It's called physiological sighing. And again, when we're talking about taking responsibility, we're talking about managing our emotions. And emotion it's simply an energetic sensation in your body. That's all it is. So instead of focusing on what caused you to be mad, focused on the anger. Don't look at Steve for pissing you off and trying to control Steve because he pissed me off. He looked at me in a different way. Look at myself and say, okay, take a deep breath in. I'm feeling angry. Breathe in a little bit more. This is hard. And breathe out. And I'm going to be okay. Just inhale, hold it, inhale a little bit more, hold that, and exhale. While you're doing that, say, I'm feeling angry. So you're recognizing you're feeling angry. That's self-compassion, that's awareness, that's self-love. You're no longer focused on Steve. And then you're telling yourself, you're validating yourself, and you're going to be okay. You're doing everything that you wanted your parent to do. You're doing everything you wanted Steve to do. But you're not relying on your parent. You're not relying on Steve. You're relying on yourself. That's it.
Brilliant. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
No.
Christen, what
If you
comes to
can do
mind
it.
for you?
I think the easiest thing that comes to mind, and I was kind of trying to think about how I could be really profound with this and come up with something that was my own, but I won't. I'll just fall back on something that's very, very old and a good strategy, which is if you could take one day this week and at the end of the day, take 10 minutes to reflect on your day, take a look back at it, see if you did anything wrong. Pick one that's easy if this is like new and hard. Pick one thing, one person that maybe you wronged that you have easy access to, that you know will be understanding. I think that's critical at first, right? Like when we're making our amends, when I was making my amends, my sponsor was like, let's start with some easy ones. So like pick somebody that's going to be accessible, that you know is going to be understanding, and practice. Do the thing that Julie and we were all talking about. Go back and say, and give them a call and say, hey, when I got off the phone real quickly earlier with you, it was, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. I just want to call you back and tell you I love you, and give you a chance to say whatever you were going to say, or whatever that one thing is. I think that's a great way to start the practice.
Love that.
And to see how it works, right? To have it,
Love
to
that.
integrate it working.
Experience it.
Yeah.
Just
Brilliant.
try it. Just try it, but keep it simple at first. Keep it simple.
Yep.
Try it with someone easy, like,
And that's what we're all about with this last question, is what is something simple just to start practicing. So that's so well said, and another really good exercise. Mine isn't nearly as brilliant or profound, but I would say that the next time you feel yourself really emotionally activated because of a situation that's outside of your control, to stop and step back and just say, what am I feeling and what can I do right now? Because when we bring our focus back to what can I do, then we stop trying to place the blame and place the responsibility on other people. We take responsibility for our own actions.
Awesome. Sean, you said something right here at the end, and it goes with what I wrote down. For me, it was to realize it's a small thing, but it feels bigger than what it is. But you're in charge of your own forgiveness.
Yeah.
And Sean, when you talked about like breathing in, I am angry, and then when you exhale, I'm okay, that is you being in charge of your own forgiveness. And once I recognized that forgiveness was a gift that I got to give to myself, then I never had to look for someone else to give it to me so I could feel better about whatever that was that happened. So Christen and Sean, thank you guys so much for coming and sharing your hearts and your minds with us. Loved having you guys here, and I look forward to seeing you guys again.
Thank you.
thanks, guys.
Thanks so much for being here. And to our listeners, make sure if you enjoyed this content, if this is the kind of thing you are looking for in your life and in your recovery, make sure you guys hit subscribe, hit follow, and keep in touch. We'll have a new episode out every Monday, like we always have, and can't wait to see you next week.